All right, I am just heading into the office here. It's pretty crappy out. It looks like it was raining while I took a little nap, but it's okay. And I gotta get some gas, but it should be good to go. Google Maps is like, there's 15 accidents and whatever else going on. That's okay. Now, this week, though, for me is a lot of connects at Microsoft. And again, if you're not familiar with what connects are at Microsoft, it's not the conversation that is the result of a performance review, but it's like a checkpoint that we leverage for level setting expectations, and then like these types of things get used for performance reviews, right? So, for example, if I'm working with an employee and they're doing really well, and we want to make sure that the result of the connect and the conversation around the connect is that they understand that. Like, they go, okay, I know I'm meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. Good news. Or the opposite, right? If someone is underperforming or there's some challenges, that we can use a connect to make sure that they understand that. Ultimately, like I always say, one of the goals is that there are no surprises. So the obvious bad scenario is if someone thinks that they're doing well, and when it comes time for the actual performance reviews, and these happen, by the way, like the results of them are delivered in August, so we've already passed that for the whole year. So if someone's doing not great and they don't realize that, then it's a really bad situation, because then they're caught off guard, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're all like, and rightfully so, because it's confusing, right? So not a good spot to be in. But I also say, like, it's not, I mean, it's a better spot, but it's not great if someone is shocked that they are getting promoted or good rewards. Obviously, that's like a good surprise, but the difference is that I think someone can be happy and excited and being like, oh, like this is, I don't know, like, oh, it's more than I expected, or oh, I didn't think that it was going to happen right now. But it's different if they were like, I had no idea that I was doing well. So if they're completely caught off guard by even good news, then to me that tells me I'm not doing a good enough job communicating. So no surprises is the goal. And that way people are able to focus on what's important and, move forward and make progress. So I'm doing a lot of that this week, and it's one of those things where, like, there's simply not enough time in the day, in my opinion, to do it properly. So because I do my connect conversations, so basically, if I back up a little bit, employees will fill out a connect. So it's a document where they can talk about their wins, their their setbacks and challenges, and then what their goals are coming up. And they fill that out, and then I respond to it in the document with my own comments so that it is truly documented. And then we have a conversation about it. So that's the typical flow of things. But there's also, and I've talked about this before, but there's this like a talent guide. It's like a rubric, and it has a lot more detail around expectations for certain traits, characteristics, and things like that at different levels. And I like making sure that when I have my Connect conversations and when I'm writing information into a Connect, that I have both of these things addressed. And it's not mandatory or required to have this talent guide thing done, but in my opinion, it should be mandatory. So I take it upon myself to make sure that I'm doing that for each employee. And that way they can see for every single thing, like, here's my perspective around how you're addressing this, or if there's opportunities we should try to find for you to make sure that you get this exposure. And then I bridge them both together so that when I'm leaving comments in the Connect and giving my feedback, like, I can literally take pieces from that talent guide and show individuals, like, hey, on this project, like, you were demonstrating this. And that way the feedback I've gotten from employees that have gone through this with me is that they think it makes an enormous difference. So I keep doing it. But the challenge right now is, like I said, there's just simply not enough time in the day. So I have to have the conversations during the day with employees, but then that leaves me essentially no time at all to be responding to them, because it takes, depending on how much people write, I like to try and match it. So if people don't write a lot, they don't have to. But if they don't write a lot, I'm not going to go into super detail. I'll give them my response as a kind of match similarly. And if they write a lot, then I try to make sure that I, not try to like word count match, but I'm trying to make sure that if they were very verbose, that I try to give them verbose feedback as well. So it means that sometimes I end up like spending just in the write-up part, in the response, like a couple of hours. So like last night, for example, I had one person that wrote a ton and one person that wrote a little, kind of balanced out, but it took me over 3 hours to kind of get through and just do the written stuff. And this is just like after work. So the fact that I'm driving into work a little bit later today, again, I'm trying to make sure that I am balancing things out. It's 100% going to result in me working more hours this week, which is totally fine. This is the kind of stuff that I think is really important as an engineering manager. So, I'm not bothered by it, but I'm going to try to be responsible with my own time. So if I have to drive in a little later, leave a little earlier, that's cool. In this particular case, I know I have a meeting at the very end of the day, so I am already going to be staying a little later at the office, but that's kind of where things are at. So I'm just going to stop here to get gas. Obviously, you don't need to watch that. This will be the one part I trim out. This person is parked right in the middle, so I can't get gas. Maybe I can. But I'll trim this part out, and then we will resume on a fun topic from the weekend. Okay, we're ready to get back at it. It was pretty frustrating. There's like a guy parked in the middle of like 3 pumps. I don't know, like maybe that's just, I'm sure he didn't pull up that way and decide to be a jerk. So I got to a pump, and then there's just like a cup instead of the actual like nozzle. So like, okay, like a pump's not working. That gas station, I don't know why. I should learn my lesson. That gas station is always stupid. There's always something stupid going on at that gas station. Whether it's pumps out of order or something else, it's stupid, but it's so convenient. Okay, so the topic I wanted to talk about on the drive today is around this funny situation from the weekend, and it's a continuation of the previous video. So if you watched the last one and ended up here, awesome. If not, I'll catch up pretty briefly. So I was talking about like users making feature requests and them doing the solutioning around the feature requests, and why I think that's a dangerous trap to just feed into accepting a solution from a user instead of understanding why they're after it. So one of the things that came up over the weekend was around this keyword search capability for Brand Ghost. And for a little bit more context, the team that is building Brand Ghost, there's a bunch of people in Canada. So this past weekend was Canadian Thanksgiving. Yes, it's a different time than American Thanksgiving. No, it is no different. It's just a different time, and it's not as I don't want to say it's not as celebrated. That's the wrong phrasing, but it's not as big of a deal. Like Thanksgiving in the US is like ridiculously big, and in Canada it's like, in my opinion, it's kind of like Easter, Thanksgiving. It's just another kind of holiday. But US is like Thanksgiving, like take the whole year off. So anyway, it's Thanksgiving in Canada, and I think for a couple of the guys, they were taking some extended holidays to be with their families. So good opportunity to do it before the end of the year. But what that means, and this is not a criticism at all, this is just me explaining the scenario, it means that we're not going to be able to deliver some things as effectively during this period where they have some time off. So not a big deal, but we just have to understand that. So with that said, I had a user request for some keyword searching, and I said, okay, like now that I've dug into it and I understand what's up, we're not going to be doing semantic search right away. I think that will be a cool thing to do later because we have to do a lot of sort of like vector-based indexing on the content anyway to do better work with AI on content. So that's coming. We could do semantic search later. I think that'll be cool. But for now, I said, hey, you know what? I can whip up the back end to write an API that's going to feed back the list of content. Like, I basically already had all of that piped through. I just don't have an ability to provide a search query. And I'm like, this should be pretty easy. Like, I can probably get this done honestly in like an hour tops. And sure enough, I was I could copy and paste a route. I could change some of the parameters around, and honestly, I had within like 10 minutes, I had something end to end where I was like, this should at least allow someone in the front end when they're back from vacation to be able to access this, query things, and great, like, cool. At least for the like 95% happy path. Like, are there edge cases and stuff I might need to think through? Sure, but to at least get it usable, I feel very good about it. So when it came time to go try this out, I realized, oh crap, like, okay, the amount of data we have is not huge. It will be someday, but right now it's not huge. And I was like, you know what? Doing a keyword search without an index is going to be real crappy. So I said, I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that there's an index on the column that has the content I want to search over. So again, I'm not concerned about that. I go to MySQL Workbench and go to apply an index on this column, and then I realized it's a text column, and text columns are not allowed to have just a normal index on them. So I was like, oh no. So now I'm having a bit of a panic where I'm going, okay, like, it will probably work without it, but it's going to feel kind of ridiculous if we don't have much content, someone goes to search, and it's just like real slow. So I had a bit of a moment, and I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but I was like, oh, like, literally there is a full text index that you can use on a text column. And I said, okay, great, like, have a workaround. So I said, okay, I got to go back to the query, change it up, and it's kind of weird. I like writing my own SQL, but there's some things like a full text search on a column is not something I write that often. So I'm like, I don't remember the syntax. Go look it up. I'm like, okay, it looks straightforward. Drop it in. Awesome. Okay, now I'm like, time to actually start testing this out. And I go to run it, and it doesn't work. And it's not working because it's just timing out. So it's taking over 30 seconds. It's taking over 30 seconds to go run this query. And I'm going, this is impossible. Like, there's literally not that much data. I feel like I could go through the bytes by hand faster and find the text. Probably not, but you know, there's honestly not that much, and there's literally zero excuse for it to be taking 30 seconds, in my opinion. Okay, so where do we go from here? I'm like, all right, well, the query that I'm using is basically identical to another one. It's just that there's an additional clause on it for the what's it called, the actual full text search. So I said, okay, like, I suspect my full text search is totally bricking this thing somehow, even though there's an index now. But like, let me remove it. And then I realized it's also not working so well on the base query. It's finishing, but it's like, it's real slow. And I'm going, oh no. So here's the issue. I basically am touching a piece of code trying to, it's not quite extending it, but I'm reusing the pattern that's already there, building upon it, and the base pattern that I'm using is already proving to be problematic. So now I'm about to propagate that pattern even further. And I'm going, oh no, like, this ain't good. Like, I don't want to go build this feature and use this pattern if it's that awful. So part of me is going, like, I don't understand why, like, we're not seeing this in production. Like, something's really weird here, but, like, I can repeat this nonstop, and I can repeat it. I tested it outside of our C# application because I'm going, maybe, I don't know how. Maybe there's something going on with the app itself. I'm going to go to MySQL Workbench and run it. Same behavior, right? It's taking too long. So at this point, I'm like kind of freaking out. I'm going, okay, I got this really simple thing I'm supposed to do. I'm noticing like this really bad existing behavior. So, like, what's up here? And I start trying to do like explain query plans on the actual query itself. I'm feeding it to ChatGPT to see if I can get any more ideas. It's suggesting more indices and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, it wants some compound indices, but I'm like, these columns are already individually indexed, and like, there's legitimately not that much data. So like, I can't explain what's going on here. So I want to kind of come back to the generalized view of this scenario I'm talking about for like general software engineering. I'm going to come back and explain how I ended up kind of making some progress on it. So the idea that I wanted to talk about here, though, is kind of like around estimates and prioritizing things. So in this situation, I decided that I would prioritize my time trying to implement this back-end change that was not critical to get done. And in the sense of urgency, there was no urgency, because if I got it done in 2 seconds, I don't have someone in the front end that's going to be able to even code against it. They're on vacation. So it's not urgent in that sense. And the point and the reason that I prioritize it is because I said it should be so simple that it would be almost like kind of silly just to delay it, because I can go knock this out right away. But the reality is it's not how it happened in practice. And I think that this is important to think about, because this kind of thing happens all of the time in software engineering. Maybe you're not as kind of silly as I am in terms of like how I mess this up. But like, it happens where people end up, saying, oh, it should be quick, and then it's not. Now, how I wanted to talk about this in like a general software engineering sense is that I think it's really important when you're working in teams to be able to call this stuff out like right away. So if you're estimating that something's going to take like X amount of time, right? So whether it's a day, whether it's an hour, whether it's a week, whatever, I'm not big on estimates in the first place, but at least if you're like, we have a feeling it should be super quick or take roughly some amount of time, if you are noticing that it is not on track, I think that it's incredibly important to raise awareness of that as soon as possible. And I think that some people are nervous about this. They're fearful because, like, if someone said, we think that this should take like an hour because it's so simple, and all of a sudden it's not taking an hour, it's like taking significantly longer, do people feel like they're letting down their team? Like they want it to be accountable? I'm going to take this on, I'm going to deliver it, but all of a sudden, like, now you can't get it done. You're blocked. Like, are you not good enough? Are you not smart enough? Are you missing the point? Like, I think some people get nervous that they're letting people down and that they might look bad. So what they end up doing is they just double down on not saying anything. They're like, no, like, I'm going to get it done. And that thing that was supposed to take an hour is now you're 2-3 hours in. And then you start panicking more and you're like, oh man, like, this is now getting really embarrassing because we were supposed to be so easy. And you just keep doubling down on the fact that, like, you are trying to be accountable for it. But I think that this is very problematic, and maybe it sounds obvious as I'm saying it, because sometimes my examples feel a little bit contrived and exaggerated. But honestly, people do this kind of thing, and it's like I don't blame them, but I think we need to do a better job in general, like fostering a culture where people understand that, like, no one is assuming that we're going to have the ability to perfectly estimate how much time something will take. It's just completely unrealistic. But why it's helpful to talk about things going off track early is because prioritization. So to give you an example, my situation from the weekend, like, I am the product owner. I'm doing what I want. Now, if someone else was the product owner and they said, "Hey, Nick, like, yeah, I think that's a good one to jump on because it is quick, right? It's like it's not urgent, but it's so simple. You know, engineering teams agreeing it's simple. We should just knock it out and get it done." The challenge though is like it's not, and then all of a sudden, if you're pouring more time into it, then what ends up happening is that it's potentially a missed opportunity to be working on other more important things from a priority perspective. So to continue on that example, if I told the product owner, "Hey, like, we said it was going to take an hour, and like, you know, I'm already like 2 hours in, and I'm really thinking there's some complication here, and like we might want to rethink this," that product owner has an opportunity to say, "Okay, you know what? We said it wasn't urgent. Let's park it for now. Like, thank you for working on it. Let's make sure that we have a note on where the complication was, so we can reevaluate it. But like, let's switch gears to this other thing because now that we know that's going to take longer, no worries. Let's pivot to something else." Like, you have that ability to do that thing that we call agile, where you're being agile, you're being nimble, you're pivoting to things that might make more sense. Conversely, if you stuck to your plan and you're going over budget on time, like, you end up in these situations where you're spending potentially a lot of time on something that's truly just not important at that point in time. So my perspective on this is just that communicating this kind of thing early and often, if you're off track, there's no shame in it, right? Like, and people should build cultures around this where there is no shame. Because as soon as people start to feel like shameful of like things taking too long, and they're worried and they're embarrassed, they're not going to speak up about it. They're going to do the exact opposite. They're going to keep hiding from it because they are embarrassed, they are afraid, and they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to be criticized. So I think we have to do a good job in being welcoming of this kind of stuff and saying, "Hey, look, like, you know, if it's off, it's totally fine. Like, it's not, there's so many things that aren't like a person's fault." So in the example, maybe this one was my fault, I don't know. But there could be all sorts of things we didn't account for that explain why something ends up taking longer. And we don't know until we go do it. So like to blanket statement, just blame people for things taking longer is kind of silly. And like, I encourage people to shy away from that because it's not helpful. Now, there are going to be situations where people, maybe they need coaching, maybe they need to skill up and stuff, and like that can be addressed separately. Like, someone should work with, engineering managers should work with their employee, or the other way around, right, to initiate it. But that should be addressed. I'm not saying that there isn't room for that kind of thing, but I'm saying the sort of the majority case that we should be focusing on is when things are not on track, we should be speaking up about them so that we can make more informed decisions. So to go back to my situation from the weekend, I said, okay, like, I have no idea why this is happening, but like, I don't want to like go testing stuff in production because I'm learning I'm learning that and I've already talked about this in these vlogs, but I'm learning that we're at the point now where I'm feeling nervous about doing things in prod. We have database backups and stuff. It's not going to be catastrophic by any means, but I don't want to risk any downtime. just because it's not fair to people, especially if I have all the tools to be able to do it locally. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go run this stuff locally. And I said, there's a way that I can do that because I can literally dump the database and then re-import all the content locally. I can do this on my machine. And that way, I can experiment with the query. I can, if I need to index things, I can do that. So that's exactly what I did. I dumped the database and then I wrote I don't want to say I wrote a functional test. I was using a testing framework to go do it, but imported all the data, ran the query against it, and I put the, from going back and forth to ChatGPT, I said, okay, it wants all these compound indices on there. I'm going to jam them on, and we're going to see. And it went from being like, not completing in 30 seconds to executing in like 1 second. And I was like, oh man, okay. Maybe there's something going on here. And I was like, okay, like that's good to know, but like now that means I'm gonna have to figure out a strategy for applying the indices on the live data, making sure I'm not locking stuff up. But at least I know the query itself can be structured in a way that's fast enough. Like that's a good spot to be in. Like I feel good about this now. And then so I start writing tests on this stuff because I'm like, I want to make sure I have my bases covered because there's other things going on in this query, and the keyword searching part was just an addition. So I said, while I'm here, I will go test the crap out of this thing on the related queries as well, and then have coverage on the keyword one. And then I had this bright idea where I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and run this again, but I'm not going to add those indices that ChatGPT recommended because I'm being stubborn. And I said, like, I'm pretty confident there's already sufficient indices on this and there's not a lot of data. So, like, it should go fast. I think I needed my query restructured, but it should go fast. And sure enough, I run it and I measure the performance of it, and it's like sub 1 second. So it was like 0.7 seconds in some of the tests that I did. Literally on the same data that's in my production database, just in a clone of it. So I'm going, like that's pretty interesting. And so I haven't concluded, but my suspicion is that things weren't working effectively when I was going from my machine to the remote database. Something weird about how that query was working was causing some type of round trip time or something else to happen. But when it was running locally, and when it's in production, it's going to be running on the same virtual network. So it should have the same characteristics of me running it locally to a database that's local. So basically, long story short, that's why I wasn't observing the characteristics in production on the existing query, because the setup is the same. It's different machines, but same network. And that's why as soon as I replicated that behavior and I was running it on the same machine, the problem went away. So anyway, that was my kind of like my stupid moment. I spent so much time on it. That's why I was saying maybe in this case, yeah, that was my fault. But lesson learned, I guess, is I should have leaned into that feeling of like, we're running this thing in prod. Like, why don't I see these characteristics in prod? And instead of like over-indexing on how to, no pun intended on the index part, but instead of like over-indexing on how to go fix this query and index things, it was like, am I comparing apples to apples right now, or is this like not the same situation? Wasn't the same situation. So anyway, I spent way too long on this thing. That was supposed to be very quick, but that's okay. So, summary. Don't be dumb like me. But in all seriousness, if you're prioritizing things and trying to estimate how long they take, and that's a factor in the priority, something can be done quick or whatever it happens to be, then I think it's important to have the conversation around if that expectation is not lining up, and ensuring that we create environments where that is the case, that people can speak up about it. A lot of stuff. Sorry, I'm just watching this guy. I was nervous. He was going to try to duck into the lane. A lot of stuff, though, I think in software engineering is like, a lot of it comes down to making sure that people have like a safe place, right? If people are fearful, people are uncomfortable, people feel like they can't ask questions, they can't reach out to people, they can't ask for help. When you have these things in place, it just it slows a team down to a halt almost. So, especially if you're in like a management leadership position, or even if you're a more like senior engineer, you don't have to be senior even. You can do this as a junior engineer, but like you have to lean into your leadership skills. Like, so whether that's formally as part of your role or informally, trying to build that culture, right? You can't dictate a culture. You can't just say, I declare that everyone must be comfortable. Be nice if we could do that, but it's not how it works. So you can't dictate the culture, but you can do the things to set up your team for success so that culture can form. So culture is like the observed result of all these other things that we do. It's not the thing that we don't just do culture and then like it happens. You do other things. You set things up in particular ways that enable a culture to flourish. And depending on what you're doing, will change what that culture is. So in this example, I think leading by example to show, when things are off track, it's okay to speak up. Like, you're not punished for it. We learn, we adjust, we adapt. Whole team does better. These are all good things. And if you can demonstrate that there's this good opportunity, then people will lean into it. But that's one of the videos from one of the talks, I guess, from one of the videos that did not survive Monday. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.